my friend, Dave Stark. Say hi, Dave! All right, and of course we have our very own Pleasanton Mayor, Mr. Jerry Thorn. Thanks, Don.
Morning. Good morning. Boy, I never thought I'd ever be on stage at Tommy T's. Can I put this on my resume?
Absolutely.
I'm not known for being a comedian. I'm an engineer, so.
Just you wait. So we have the mayor and I have a special relationship, and we can either talk about politics or religion. What do you want to do? You want to do politics or religion?
I think we better stick to politics.
Okay. I'll see it next time. Okay. I told her that I was going to probably not be early to this, or even on time to this meeting, and I said, when's the last time you walked in and saw me sitting in church? Because I always walk in after. Anyway, enough of religion. We're very, very pleased to have you here, Mr. Mayor. It's been a long time since we've had a Pleasanton Mayor here, and it's great to see you. I know that even though you were ostensibly retired, you've got a lot of things on your plate, so we appreciate you making time. I've got about 9 very hard-hitting questions, so I hope you're ready.
You only gave me 4.
So, when you look back at leadership in this town and all the changes that we've gone through in the last 30 years, you look at the mayors we've had, Mercer, the builder, Tarver, put the brakes on things and bring people in. You had Tom Pico, who kind of continued the Tarver philosophy. Jennifer Hosterman came on board. She wanted to change the world, starting here in Pleasanton. And by the time her term was up, she was very much pro-business. Her philosophy had really evolved. It was interesting to see her change as a community leader and really kind of grow into her own as a mayor. Who's Jerry Thorn? Who is Jerry Thorn?
Well, it's, I think, well, let me give you a little bit of my history and background. That might help frame.
Doesn't sound like you're from these parts.
No, if you listen to me talk long enough, you're probably going to figure out I didn't grow up here. I actually grew up in West Tennessee, about 100 miles north of Memphis. A little town called Union City, Tennessee, 6 miles south of the Kentucky border. I went to high school there and also went to the University of Tennessee. I'm a chemical engineer by training and spent some time in the U.S. Army Officer Corps as an artillery officer and moved to California in 1968 and moved to Pleasanton in 1974. I was with a company that moved me out here, and they said they were going to move me back to Boston, and I said, no, you're not. I found paradise.
And that was just a little operation you were working for, right? That little company. What were the initials for that company?
HP.
HP.
So I worked for HP out here for about 30 years, actually 28 years and 2 years with Agilent Technologies. Started out as an environmental engineer, and worked my way up through the management ranks and was a senior manager when I retired with Agilent Technologies. Had all the internal functions, including real estate at one point in time. Taking care of HP's real estate and facilities. And
do you have your real estate license?
No, I don't.
We can look it up.
So anyway, so to answer your question, the question I heard a little bit earlier, yes, I am pro-business. One of the things that I've done is I've put together what I call a kitchen cabinet that includes a number of business people around from Pleasanton to take a look at things like our permitting process and how do you streamline that, how do you streamline it and still take care of the things that we need to take care of. One of the things that I'm also working on is trying to streamline CEQA. Does everybody know what CEQA is?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that was a good law when it first came into being. It was actually signed into law by Governor Ronald Reagan. Most people don't remember that. But it has since gone through a lot of iterations, and it has become something that is just an absolute nightmare for businesses that want to develop property or something of that nature to go through that process. So we're looking at some ways that we can work with the state and with the governor to try to streamline this CEQA process. I think that's going to help us out quite a bit. Because the normal, everyday, over-the-counter kinds of permits that you get in Pleasanton are not that hard to get. And the process works fairly well. It's when you get into requirements of CEQA and the public process where people tend to not want to build projects And they go through a lot of things that will slow it down, if not stop it altogether. And CEQA was the perfect tool to do that with, because you can sue till you're blue in the face with CEQA laws. So that's kind of who I am. I'm trying to streamline things for business to make this a more business-friendly place, while working with the state of California to try to make California a destination business address as well.
Mayor Thorn, those are some pretty big picture issues you brought up, but the issue of permit streamlining and you know how important that is to all residents. When you think about Pleasanton and the folk that are in this room and the folk that they're representing, people want to buy here, people that are going to live here. I see in my neighborhood a lot of additions, a lot of people going up. They like the neighborhood, they want a bigger home, maybe they just want to change their home. So the whole concept of building permits, it's not something that's just relevant to people that want to put in a business or build a big building. It really touches anyone that owns property that might want to do something with their property.
Yeah, and that process we're looking at too, and we're going through, I'm working with the city manager right now to try to put together some performance standards for the organization. Believe it or not, cities don't operate using performance metrics. So that's something I brought over from HP in the private sector to try to put into the city process, so that we can hold our officials accountable through very specific performance metrics for what they do, including how long does it take to get a permit through the process, what's acceptable. And I think what we're going to wind up doing is having managers looking at that permit ledger every day to find out where these things are, if they're going to be measured, how quickly they can get it through the process.
So the Facebook post and the Twitter post from that comment is Pleasanton Mayor working to make it easier for property owners to improve their properties. You like that?
I like that.
Was that 134 characters? Don't clap for me, clap for this guy because he's getting it done. So, I mean, this is great. In all the mayors that I've talked to over the years in communities throughout Alameda County, I don't recall one leading with, I am pro-business. And that's
because I think that was considered to be a negative, but I'm proud of it. I'm proud of my business background. I'm proud of the associations that I have with folks like you. And if you want me to lie about that, then you've got the wrong guy.
There you go. Tweet that. So let's talk about Pleasanton. You know, in my role representing realtors across Alameda County, in many respects, knock wood, this is the easiest town that we have. There aren't that many problems that we have to deal with, from a property rights issue, or a school district performance issue, or a jobs issue, or a downtown issue. Help me out with this mystery. Why is Pleasanton so successful? And really, who's responsible for that success?
Well, I wish I could take credit for that, David, but I really can't. This goes all the way back to one of the first mayors that you mentioned, Ken Mercer. And the people that were working to put Hacienda Business Park into place, people that worked to put Stone Ridge Mall into place, people that built some of the core developments that we have around Pleasanton. I think the diversity of tax base that was generated by those people is what makes us successful today. And we are in really good shape in Pleasanton compared to other cities around the country and around the state particularly. We're still holding about $156 million in reserves and about 100 different reserve funds.
156 million. What's the city's annual budget?
This year I think it's somewhere around 90 million.
So we've got, I can't do math this earlier in the morning, this late in the week, so the whole place could shut down and the city could keep operating, cops, firefighters, all that stuff from...
Well, let me qualify the 156 million. A lot of that is earmarked. Like I said, it's in 100 different funds. It's spread out through things that we have to use it for, like capital improvements or fixing our roads or workers' compensation reserves and that sort of thing. What we have that we could actually draw on if we had to was the $25 million in the general fund.
$25 million. How do other cities compare in terms of what they've got in their reserves?
You know, I haven't checked around. I think a lot of cities are operating hand to mouth right now, and they really don't have any reserves. A lot of cities are in debt. I don't know whether you heard about it or not, but at our last council meeting, we voted to actually pay off the golf course. and use some of the reserve funds that we have set aside for capital improvements and that sort of thing, and go ahead and pay the golf course. We'll be debt-free completely.
Tweet that. Don't quote him, but tweet that. Rumor has it we'll be debt-free. So to talk, use a real estate analogy, a home analogy, the foundation in Pleasanton, the combination of the business community, the Hacienda Business Park, which is larger than the city of Emeryville, whatever the hell that means. The housing, the schools, we've got a great foundation.
We do have a great foundation and a diverse tax base. We have retail sales tax. Of course, we have the property tax base. And we have Hacienda Business Park. And we've got hotels that we get hotel taxes from. So a lot of times when one of them's up and another one's down, we still come out of the other end okay.
These folks are here today to help people buy and sell homes. And the big question...
Is that what you guys are here for?
Yeah. Believe it or not. And to wish a few happy birthdays as well. The big question that we have, that they all have today, is where's my next listing going to come from? You know, who's going to put their home on the market, and is there any new development coming that I could eventually sell in the future? I know that there's been some rezoning. We've got some apartments coming in Hacienda. Tell me, from your perspective, what is the future of residential development in Pleasanton?
Well, right now, as David mentioned, we're concentrating on complying with a little trouble we got into with some lawsuits, and with RENA, that's the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and trying to get enough affordability into some of our developments that we can get out of trouble with those. We actually now have a certified housing element for the first time in 10 years, I think. That was primarily because we've gone back and rezoned the land that David was talking about for high-density development. So we do have a number of projects coming on board. If anybody's interested in knowing which projects are which and where they are, most of them are apartments. There will be a number of single-house units on the Bernal property by South Bay Development. And those are the only ones I know of that are in the pipeline right now. I think in the future, since we no longer have a housing cap, that we will see some infill developments and things of that nature that will give you some additional stock to work with.
So when you're approving these applications for high density, you get the input from your department heads, police, fire, public safety,
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. Plus some unappointed, unelected folk as well. I think there's this immediate visceral reaction when people hear high density housing. And when you think about Pleasanton, you think about the established neighborhoods, whether it's Birdland or Amador Estates, where I'm proud to call home, Amador Estates. But the folk that operate the city, what's their take on high-density housing? Do they think that it's going to be the end of the world, or is it just how a community evolves?
Absolutely not. It's if you take a look at what rental property costs here in Pleasanton today, these are folks that they might be teachers, firemen, are kids that are just getting started. The only problem that I have with all this is, when I was growing up, I wanted to reach the American dream. And one of the first things I started doing was try to buy a house. And I wound up building my first house at 23 years old. And most of the kids today can't do that. And I'm afraid that particularly with the cost of rental housing, that these kids aren't going to be able to put away enough money to actually buy anything very early in life. So I would rather see us get into building more affordable single-family homes at some point in time than we are today, because today we have to go to high density because of the lawsuits we were involved in. You know all this. You were a housing commissioner for ages. But I think that's the direction we need to go in, and hopefully we'll switch those gears at some point in time.
So, speaking of switching gears, and the time that I was on the Housing Commission, you didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be mayor. You put in some time. You were on the Parks Commission, correct?
Right, 10 years.
I was a decade on the Parks Commission. I was in your pool last night, by the way. Okay. It's called Dolores Banksman Aquatic Center, but this is the guy that really got it built. So could you give him a round of applause for this? You did spend on the Planning Commission, right?
No, I was never on the Planning Commission.
Okay.
In difference to the Weekly, I was never on the Planning Commission.
So a decade on the Parks Commission, where we saw a lot of new facilities come online. Then you ran a couple times before you hit the city council, right?
No, we didn't have to bring that up.
Well, but Abe Lincoln, I'm just saying, and look, he's on a coin now, $1, $5. Now you're mayor. So you've had a long-term experience in community leadership. Looking around this room, I just see people that are perfect to be community leaders because of how much they know about communities. Long time, a lot of pressure, a lot of effort, a lot of shoe leather, walking precincts. Hasn't been worth it. What have you learned? Would you recommend people either get appointed or get elected?
Now listen, I wouldn't trade my experience with public service for anything in the world. As David said, I've got hooked on this by getting the 50-meter pool built at the Aquatic Center. And then Mayor Ben Tarver asked me to be on the Park and Rec Commission, where I spent about 10 years. But you get hooked on this, and it's because of community involvement. There's a really high level of satisfaction in seeing these things get accomplished and making your community a lot better. But one of the things that I've learned in being part of the community leadership team is that you can't run a city like you do a private business, believe me. I mean, in private business, you find that you try to streamline the decision-making process, and you try to push the decision-making ability to the lowest level in the organization so that you can get things done quickly. That doesn't happen in government. Government tends to make decisions very slowly. Like I said, we're trying our best to streamline that, but the very nature of the public process, getting public input and what have you, is just a time-consuming thing to go through. So we're trying to streamline it, but the one thing that I've learned is statesmanship. And that's the ability to get people together and just come to some win-win solution to things. Just to give you an example, David mentioned my Park and Rec days. We had a situation out on the Burnell property where we had people with very different interests that wanted to make sure their interests got into the plan for the Burnell property. So there was the arts group, and then there was a sports group. And of course the sports groups wanted to cover the whole place with sports fields. And the arts groups wanted a place to have some kind of an arts facility at some point in time. And where that was going to be was kind of the question mark, because everybody wanted the prime space. It took only one meeting with those people to pull them together and get them to come to some conclusion, and they actually came to the podium together and recommended the solution. So that's the kind of thing you learn from being in government, or any kind of government, that you don't necessarily learn in the private sector.
So what you're saying is that if you've got people that spend their day and don't get paid until they can get a bunch of people to say yes, they may be uniquely qualified for city government?
Absolutely.
Just saying. How are we doing on time? Do we have time for questions?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I heard on the TV, I believe it was #2, Pleasanton was rated #2. It was Palo Alto, Pleasanton, and San Ramon as one of the most prosperous areas to live in. Was that statewide or throughout the U.S.?
I think that was U.S.-wide.
That was the universe, wasn't it?
I think that was U.S.-wide.
Wow.
Yay, Pleasanton!
I'm not sure about that, but when I read it, I got that impression it was U.S.-wide.
Okay, we've got an attorney that's going to answer your question, so
Let's look at your
the
The Valley Humane Society would like to know, do we have a dog park in the plans for the city? Dublin's got 4 or 5, and we've got one shoved against the freeway in Goodwin.
What, Kathy wants to take you for a walk?
That just happened. There's a new mayor in town. Could you answer the question, sir? Dog park, yes or no?
I'm trying to avoid it. To answer your question, there are a lot of people that feel as you do. At this point in time, we haven't identified a place for a dog park, but our Park and Rec Commission is working on trying to find another location for it. They're looking at Bernal, they're looking at a number of different parks around town. We tried to put one out behind the St. Elizabeth Seat in the park. The neighbors just went ballistic. They didn't want dogs back there where they might bite their kids and that sort of thing. I think we will eventually find a couple of additional places for dog parks.
We got time for one
cheap
more.
to build too, so.
We got one more question for Jerry Thorn, our newly elected mayor of Pleasanton. One more question? Yes, sir, up front here.
I have a question about.
Wait for the microphone. Wait for the microphone. Stand up, please.
I have a question about the BART station. It seems to be causing a lot of problems with the at the shopping center. A lot more crime going on. There's some talk that there's going to be a